All right, I'm going to try to discuss this and get this video done, get it uploaded, and be good to go. So, first off, I got a new hoodie today that my wife actually ordered this for me. It's, of course, a Billie Eilish hoodie, so it's comfortable. I'll say that for it. And it's not too hot out for me to wear a hoodie briefly yet. Hopefully, it will be soon because it's supposed to be summer. Supposed to be. So Joss Whedon, word came out that he was a prick on the set of Justice League. I thought it was interesting that Alan Tudyk, who acted on his set on Firefly, came to his defense, and then people said, "Hey, you don't know what other actors have experienced." So he said, "All right, you're right. I don't know what other actors have experienced." And so now we're hearing more and more stories about Joss Whedon basically being a jerk. And basically being egotistical and having a mind of I run this is mine. And I have to say, and this is a conversation I've had with my wife many times, where I think there has been a hierarchy in Hollywood when it comes to directors, actors. I definitely think in political realms there's a hierarchy where people can just behave that way, and people have always kind of behaved that way. And it's been viewed as being fine. That's sort of all right. Well, yeah, he went off and yelled and screamed today. I've had bosses yell and scream at me, and shrugged it off and go, yeah, well, these things happen. And the kind of thing that by today's standard, if somebody had a cell phone out and they recorded it, they'd be like, holy crap! And that person may very well have lost their job, or there might have been all kinds of repercussions out of it. And I don't think that what Joss Whedon is being, or Joss Whedon is being. I don't even want to say accused of, but because basically it's just he can be intolerable on the set. I don't think it's that unusual with directors. And the interesting thing is that Stanley Kubrick, when he made The Shining, by the end of that, when your lead actress completely hates your guts by the end of a show, and Shelley hated him, and you see, and if you haven't watched The Shining, if you haven't watched the extended and all the extra footage from behind the scenes, it's fascinating because Shelley Duvall was miserable on that set. And you could see she wasn't even trying to hide her contempt for the director. And if that happened now, yeah, Kubrick could be on the whole canceled end of things. But it's not that unusual to have a director that's a dictator on the set. Is it acceptable anymore? I don't know. I do think that as a director, you have to have a certain amount of authority. I think that you have to have a certain amount of respect from your cast, and I think there's a lot of pressure. With the story that came out today, which was that he basically yelled at James Marsters because the character Spike became way more popular than he ever intended for it to be. And he was kind of ticked off at it that he had a direction for the show and the viewers were kind of taking it another direction than the way he wanted to go. Eventually, Spike, of course, would become a regular in the show and became a love interest for Buffy. And Joss didn't want that. He didn't want vampires to be love interests. He didn't want them to be soft characters. He wanted them to be hard characters and villains and evil. And with James Marsters, with Spike, it was just a matter of he was delightful. And he was fantastic to watch. So, he definitely caused some opinions to be changed as that season went along. He was in season 2. But for Joss to yell and scream at him, yeah. And again, this ends up being news because we are paying attention to all of this now. Now, I want to talk about Lucifer. They released the trailer for season 5. I am so tired of trailers telling me everything that's going to happen. You don't have to do that. So apparently it's going to be Lucifer and Michael, who are apparently twins. Now, we all know about the Archangel Michael, right? If you've watched Supernatural, you know about the Archangel Michael and all that. So apparently it's going to be Lucifer versus Michael in season 5. And I stopped the trailer about halfway through, where I was like, I don't need to know the entire season. And the fact that it's trailer number 1, meaning there's going to be other trailers, that's not good either. So I'm not a huge fan of that. It releases next month. And yeah, so we'll see how things go. And whether this season makes up for... Season 4 was not great. It was not great. Season 4 had an interesting start, And at the end, it kind of salvaged itself a little bit with that last episode, but it was not great. I think if they... I didn't see Eve in the part of the trailer I saw. If they drop Eve altogether, that whole season kind of becomes a meh. Just meh, the whole season. Just you could have just had like a TV movie, a 2-hour episode that could have done what that entire season did. A waste. So hopefully Lucifer gets it back on track in season 5. And more fun in the show. More and yet they could back off on everybody needing to hook up with somebody. They could really back off on that. Now, I also wanted to talk about this. So we talk a lot about cancel culture and where it is. It's not new. We talk about it like it's new. It's not new. So just doing a quick search of the old Google machine, and as part of the tubes of the internet that we all partake of and enjoy, ad boycotts. So right now we're looking at the Washington Redskins had an ad boycott that made them say, well, maybe we'll change the name. But really, the pressure had been on them for decades to change the name. Facebook, of course, recently went under an ad boycott, and Tucker Carlson has had an ad boycott. And in ellipses there, I've got YouTube. As a YouTuber, I've watched over the last 4 years as sometimes revenues will do this because advertisers pull their money out of YouTube. It's what they do. We had this in March where they pulled a lot of money out of YouTube and a lot of YouTubers watched as their income dropped by 50-60%. While their views may actually have been going up, the amount of money they were making was going down. And this is just how things work. This is how the marketplace works. And so if we look all the way back, the furthest back I could find, and there's likely to be ones from before this, because I was thinking, back in the 70s, I know there was stuff that got boycotted. 1983, the day after. So the movie came out, and it was considered a very realistic depiction of nuclear war, and nobody wanted to advertise on it. So while it was a huge hit TV show, movie, and everybody was affected by it, I never watched it. I'm going to be honest, I never watched it. I knew what it was about, and I was like, I don't need to watch that. That's enough of that crap. And so I never watched it. Still to this day, I've never watched it. So advertisers pulled their money out. The movie did very well, and it generated a lot of attention, and I would imagine the network did pretty well, even though advertisers pulled themselves out of there. And of course, with the 80s and the 90s, Howard Stern. Howard Stern was constantly trying to tick people off, and he's been upsetting advertisers and viewers and listeners equally throughout his entire run. And with Stern, you can kind of see that he's of the mind of, all right, how am I going to offend people today? And, I mean, there have been times in my life where I thought Howard Stern was really funny. There have been times in my life where I didn't think he was funny at all. And where do I stand on him right now? I think he's kind of a shadow of what he was. I don't think it's the same at all. I think that the amount of time he's spent in the public eye, I think it's really softened a lot of those edges. So I don't think he's the same guy at all. But we get caught up in this because the whole idea is, well, there's freedom of speech. There is. Yeah, you can say what you want, but there's always consequences to the things you say. So where I have a problem is when I see a celebrity or somebody getting taken down for something they tweeted out like a decade ago. And it's usually a bad joke. It's something said in bad taste. You kind of go, ah. And if you watch old comics, like old comedians, you watch the old, evening at the Improv kind of stuff, any of that, you will catch a joke or two in any given episode where you go, boy, couldn't tell that joke now. And I do think sometimes people push it too far. I think where the problem with it is that, so let's say you say something I find highly offensive. I can say I find that offensive. Awesome. So we can then disagree. We can have that disagreement. Where I think the internet kind of goes to the ridiculous length is, it's not enough for me to tell you that I'm offended. I need to make sure you don't think that anymore. That's not going to happen. You're not going to pull advertising money out of Tucker Carlson with the idea that Tucker's gonna change anything. He's not going to. It's the #1 rated news show in the States. So And regardless of why it's number one, whether people are watching it because they believe him or watching it just to get enraged at him, doesn't matter. It's still number one. Now, when the advertising money comes out, it means Fox is making a lot less money. And Fox News does make a lot less money than it could because it puts on a lot of shows that, yeah, advertisers pull out of. And as an advertiser, I understand that. Even back when YouTube was losing money and we creators were seeing our money drop, I understood it. I understood what was going on and why. I may not have been happy about it, but I understood that an advertiser saying, I don't want my ads playing on a video that's about this topic, and you guys can't convince me that it won't be. Which was the concern at the time, which was that YouTube didn't have any control over necessarily where the ads were going. That they were being served on content that the advertisers would never have approved of. That's a problem. That is a problem that I'm glad YouTube seems to have mostly addressed. It's never going to be 100%, but they've mostly addressed. The biggest issue that I've seen is that the gray areas have kind of disappeared. Ricky Gervais was talking about how if you have a conservative voice right now on any level, you can be compared to Hitler. It's just right away. And, it is one of those things that definitely happens. And I don't go to that length. So if I come out and say, yeah, the Washington, their NFL team should change its name, Chicago Blackhawks, no, I don't think they need to. The Edmonton Eskimos, no, they can if they want to. And if they've decided not to, that's fine too. As long as it's in agreement with the right people and as long as, you're going about it the right way, there's no reason to have to do that. Now, the baseball team in Cleveland, the Cleveland Indians, have looked at changing their name. And there's some talk about whether or not that happens. Look, it's not about necessarily people being woke. It's not necessarily about people changing anything. There's a very cold calculus to corporate thinking, which is what's going to make me the most amount of money. And right now, if you're an owner in Washington and you're saying the thing that's going to make me the most amount of money is to leave the team name exactly the same, then you're probably not thinking about this correctly. The best way to make money right now, change the name. Embrace it, change the name, make it... I saw Red Wolves was one that people were talking about today. It's an awkward one, but I understand Red Wolves are endangered, so again, it keeps that red in the name, and there's been talk about Warriors and all this, and whether or not it's owned by somebody else. I will say this, there is somebody who owns a lot of the copyrights or trademarks on the different names Washington could use. He was only using those so other people couldn't take them, and he's already offered for free to give those up to Washington, and the football team has yet to contact him. So he is not holding up the process. He has said he has no problem with the football team taking any of the names he has a trademark for. It's just there are gray areas, and when it comes to the cancellation of people, like I did the one on Jimmy Kimmel there a couple weeks ago, and that seems to have kind of died down. The weird thing is he's got other people hosting his show right now, so he's got guest hosts, and there's kind of an axe to grind that's being shown by his guest hosts. It's not particularly funny either. Not that I find Jimmy Kimmel particularly funny either. I think Jimmy Kimmel can sometimes have a witty response to things, but I really don't laugh out loud watching Jimmy Kimmel very often. If at all, some episodes, not at all. But, I don't think there's going to be an actual cancellation, because in the end, you can have that anger in that moment, and you can have that conversation in that moment, but you have to keep it up. I sent a message to, I think it's Kate Quigley is the proper name. I know it's Kate Q. She's a comedian, and she's going to answer this question on her podcast, because I sent her a question. Usually guys send her kind of lewd messages, and I thought, well, I'm not sending her a lewd message because A, that's creepy, and B, I'm married, and C, that's creepy. So I asked her, and I'll be interested to know what her answer is. I will definitely check out her podcast for this. That when the speaking out movement ends, and all movements end, so for people who are upset about all the speaking out and the Me Too, it all ends. It ebbs and flows. We go through these periods where people are all upset, and advertisers are pulling money out of here and out of there, and you got people out protesting. And I think back to Last Temptation of Christ, when people were out protesting theaters. I remember the protest to get Evil Dead pulled out of theaters back in the 80s. This is not new. But I said, when this all dies down, and you've got this apparently toxic environment for female comedians. Does she think that there's going to be lasting change, or that things will go back to the way they were? So, and this to me is kind of the Joss Whedon question as well. So he's been a jerk. He's been an egomaniac. Yeah, you get to be a leader and be the boss, in part because you have an ego. That's the way that works. And I asked her, does she see things going back to normal? Does she see things going back to, misogynistic comments being thrown around constantly at female comedians kind of thing? And then I threw in at the end too, how has this affected you? Like how much of this have you had to deal with along the way? Because I've heard this in the comedy, like the comedian area of the entertainment world for years, that this kind of thing goes on. And I don't think there's been much debate about whether it did or it didn't. But is it going to change? Because I know from jobs that I had, they'd bring us in for, sexual harassment training. Oh, good, we learn how to sexually harass people. Awesome. And so you'd sit through the meeting and you giggle at all these little terminologies and you'd wander off and meander off into whatever. But at the end of the day, if anything was going to change, it was on us. And usually it didn't. Usually it really didn't. Usually we came out of those meetings going, that's so out of touch. That's not, it's all nice and fine and dandy, but we have a really stressful job. We blow off steam, and yeah, we might say something that's not going to fly with certain people, but whatever. And so again, it was on us, and I think that's what we're going to see with Hollywood. What we're going to see in general is, in order for there to be change, it's not up to us to change other people's minds. It's up to them to change their own. To get educated and to change their mind on things. I change my mind on things regularly, which is how you get labeled as being wishy-washy. But again, if you educate yourself and you go, I really think that this is important, and so therefore I'm changing my mind on this. I don't think that's a sign of weakness here either. And there are gray areas. A lot of these things are gray areas, where just because A is true doesn't mean that B has to be true. So there you go. All right. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happen upon this video. And I promise, once we get through the whole pandemic part and all that, I think it'll help with a lot of this. Because a lot of this is people who are either out of work, low on money, maybe bored, maybe frustrated, angry. 2020 sucks. And once the day comes that we can get back to some semblance of normal life, I think a lot of this goes away. But again, let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for all your support throughout the year of 2020, and we will survive this year. We will. Thanks again. I'll talk to you again soon.